And then now I am going to admit all.
All right, so I think we're live here. I hope everyone is hearing me. I'm Brian Bell, the principal of Blue Ridge Middle School in Purcellville, Virginia. We're pretty excited to share some time with you regarding multi-tiered support systems, and I'm going to let my co-presenters introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Erin Rosino, and I am the lead counselor at Blue Ridge.
And I'm Danielle Savastano, and I am another counselor over at Blue Ridge, and I am going to paste our presentation in the chat for you to follow along.
So folks, we hope that you're having a great day wherever you are in the country. We're certainly really happy to speak with you today about multi-tiered support systems. And Danielle is going to move us forward a slide so we can tell you a little bit about what today is all about. Okay, so the goal and mission of the time we're going to spend together is to try to wade through data. And if your school is like our school, we have tons of data. And we know that the data has a huge impact on the social emotional health of kids and their learning, but sometimes it can be really difficult for us to figure out what data stream is important, especially in a timely way. So we've been working at it for almost 10 years, trying to get better and better and better. And we feel that we have something worth sharing. So in the next, I'd say 35 to 45 minutes, we're going to share with you the way that we try to use data to combine social emotional health of kids along with academics so that we can get them necessary interventions as quickly as possible, and that that makes an impact. So as you can see from the mission, we're going to share with you that tiered support system. We're going to address both the social emotional and the academic, and take some questions at the end along with the simulation. Maybe let you all try a little bit. So we're glad you're here, and I think we're going to jump right in.
This is Miriam. I'm going to interrupt for just a moment.
Yeah.
Danielle or Erin, it seems that the presentation is access restricted. So folks that are trying. Yes.
I think I just fixed it.
Okay. Can you share the link again just to make sure that it's good? Okay. Oh, and someone else is recommending to just refresh your screen for the people who are on the other end trying to get access. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, next slide.
All right, so if you're just joining us, welcome. We're Blue Ridge Middle School. I'm the principal, Brian Bell, and we highlighted, just to give you a little context where we're at. You can see the top county in Virginia. It is in a yellow color, that is Loudoun. And we are sort of right up there at the top. Loudoun County Public Schools is sort of a Northern Virginia bedroom community to Dulles. Therefore, we have 95,000 students. Blue Ridge Middle School is one of 17 middle schools with about 900 kids. So the next two slides we included as survey results because we wanted to provide you just a small bit of context, because our survey results are, we feel, very strong. However, even though we had strong survey results, and we do surveys every single year, you're going to see through the presentation, we were missing kids. We were missing kids that were falling into lower levels of reading and mathematics as compared to state standards. So even though we were taking surveys, there was a group of kids that we simply were not tapping into. And that is really the focus of what we've tried to improve over really about the last 8 to 10 years. Next slide. So again, you can see it's a survey of some of our academic. Blue is Blue Ridge, and the mustard color is our district. And again, you can see we feel we're a high-performing school. However, as you'll see through this presentation, the data clearly demonstrates that there's a group of kids that we may have been missing. And that's why we work so hard to improve the system. Okay, so this is a fancy diagram, but a very helpful one. This is my 28th year in public education and my 19th in administration. And I can tell you, when I first started, I didn't use the school counselors as much as I do now. Our school counselors are excellent, and the social emotional needs of kids is something, as a school administrator in the last 5 years, I've come to depend on their expertise. So I'm talking to principals and administrators. We have combined our strength of our admin team and instructional group and the social emotional group of our counselors into one leadership team. And this leadership team has proved so vital in being able to pull apart the data and tell, because it's not always about D's and F's. There's an emotional piece that if you do not address through tiered intervention, you're not going to have an academic result. And that has been probably one of the biggest growth areas as a principal, is the importance of including a unified mental health team in the academic planning of the school. So we thought we would show this diagram to show how we come together and co-lead the entire middle school. Mr. Sino?
So what you all are looking at now is the multi-tiered system of support. Only 5 to 10% of the student population require interventions from tier 2, whereas 1 to 5% require the tier 3 type interventions. As you move up through the pyramid, interventions for students become more individualized and specific to each student's actual needs. Our goal today is going to be to talk through the specific interventions that we have put into place at Blue Ridge, and to also share how we have identified students that need these types of interventions, the types of interventions beyond tier 1, and how we do collaborate together. Brian's going to walk you through different types of data collected in a little bit, but for right now, Danielle is actually up next, and she's going to talk you through different types of tier 1 universal practices at Blue Ridge.
Yes, thank you, Erin. So right before I start talking about tier 1, I am going to paste what our multi-tier system looks like with our tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 interventions in the chat. I should have changed the settings right before you all joined, so fingers crossed you can see it right away. All right. So the purpose of tier 1 are preventative interventions, and they are set in place for the entire school building because, for lack of a better term, they're here to prevent the academic, behavioral, and social emotional pieces that can develop as a middle schooler grows throughout their time here. So one of the main drivers that we take pride in at Blue Ridge is we really love to hear student voice. And if you think about it, middle school, what is most important out of those 3 factors to a middle schooler? It's the social piece and what their peers think of them and who they start listening to the most. So we wanted our tier 1 interventions to be as interactive as possible with the students. So while there are many, many tier 1 interventions, such as PBIS lessons and awards and character counts, student conferences, we really take pride in our student-led programs. And so I will talk through 2 of them briefly for you. So peer helpers, this is the start of 7th grade. So they're here for 6th grade. We really get to know them, really get to see them develop and who really shines as a leader. And these peer helpers, they get to wear t-shirts, they lead parent night, back to school night, they give tours to new students, and they really just kind of become the face of the grade. And they're students that they want to come see you, but they also want to help other students. Now, a little different is our ambassador program. And this is a 3-year program, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and we do a training with them in 6th grade. But this program is unique because it teaches students how to stick up for one another, so the bystander, upstander effect, but they're doing it privately. There's no t-shirt for them. They're kind of like our counselors' eyes and ears, and they're looking out for misbehavior. And this is where it plays into that students, they're influenced most by their peers. So if a student tells them to kind of behave or that they might be being mean to another student, they're actually more likely to listen to a student than an adult. So that's kind of where we come across from our tier 1 interventions, and Erin is going to talk through some tier 2 ones.
So basically, if we find students are struggling and need more targeted interventions, that's when we're going to shift into tier 2. So I'll focus on just some of our interventions today, because as you guys can see, there are many, and we only have an hour. To start, we do embed math and reading support labs into our master schedule at all 3 grade levels. These labs are a time that the teacher has to focus just with a small group. There's usually about 3 to 8 students per section. And the teacher can really identify specific skills and concepts that the students need to review. We also have the student success plan as an academic intervention. These plans are basically a tool for us to use to track different interventions that we're using for students. We have structured resource, which is basically a more intensive support for organization and assignment completion. We have check-in, check-out. That is one of my favorites. We can use this as an academic, behavioral, or social emotional intervention. And it is one of my favorites because I've seen the positive impact that it can have on a student. All right, let's see. Moving into the social emotional interventions. One intervention we would like to focus on is the fact that counselors do attend the attendance meetings, which once again allows us to collaborate with admin, because many of us know that truancy issues can at times be related to mental health concerns. We also have the mentor program, in which we connect students that fall within our tier 2 level in terms of social emotional support. These students come from our local high school, and they're actually trained to be mentors. And they come and visit us usually about once or twice a month. All right, Danielle is actually going to talk through the tier 3. So now we're moving on up.
All right, so tier 3, these are the more intensive and individualized interventions, and it serves 1 to 5% of a student population. I'm not going to go into depth about the certain interventions that we do, but the main point that I kind of want to drive home is this requires a lot of adults and a lot of adult interventions where the adults are really the ones driving this tier. So we focus a lot on tier 1 being a lot of student driven, getting them to buy into the process. And tier 3 is you have a lot of hands from different adults and different groups in the building. So because this requires a lot of adult attention, our tier 1 and tier 2 interventions need to be really strong and foundational to try to prevent a student from getting here. Because imagine if 10% of your student population was in tier 3. Then you'd constantly be behind closed doors, not being able to serve your other students for those tier 1 interventions. So, you know, some of this might look like students that cannot sustain friends over time, someone who's really struggling with school and it keeps building up after every quarter, and things that the tier 1 and tier 2 interventions are just not doing it for them. So moving on to kind of show you how this all plays into our data.
Okay, everyone. So if you're just joining us, welcome. And if you've been here, it is a slow build in that we have to build some context. We're going to begin to show you some database spreadsheets that draw off of the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So remember, our main focus is how to take data, line up tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 interventions, and provide a timely response to students as they begin to struggle, so that we don't get to the end of the year and say, well, I guess we're going to have, 10% of our kids in every grade go to summer school. We don't want that. And certainly we want to avoid retention. So as you can see, we begin to look at, this is a math lab setup, and math lab is an intervention. You can see on this a variety of state scores. You can see percentile ranks, and you can see our first level of attempt. And we've been using these for years, and I'm sure many of you already do, to use database to try to figure some of this out. Next slide. Again, you're going to see another database as we started to use color to get better and better at quickly identifying students with low percentiles or low state scores and aligning that of interventions. In this case, this is still mathematics. We are able to offer a mathematics support in each grade, Math 6, Math 7, and Math 8. And we're trying to keep a very careful tab on the different groups we're working with, and of course, to whom we are using these interventions. Next slide. Now, one thing that we do have at our disposal is we did get a new piece of software that allows us to tier kids. So I can't tell you how important this has been for us. And that is a tier system has been used to separate out your lowest standard deviation. So that's about 15% red. And then that middle standard deviation, which is between about 30% down to 15%. So these kids have been identified by our district as really on the edge of grade level. So if you have something like this, that is outstanding. If not, then certainly continue to use the databases around Google Sheets and Google Forms and different things like that to identify kids. We like the tier system. Tier 1, we see as an on grade level student. Tier 2, slightly below grade level. And Tier 3, they're in the red. They're very below grade level. Take a look at this diagram. You can see very quickly that in 7th grade especially, we have a high number of red tiered students in reading. And if you look right below it, that is the division. So if you can see down there, the division typically has between 8 and 9% of students in red, but we're at 12. So immediately we know that 7th grade reading has a higher number of students that are at least in the lowest deviation. And that was something that as principal, I needed to know as early as September. This data was not getting to me that early before this particular tier system. The tier system has helped us in many ways to get help to kids as early as the 4th week of school. So the tier system, as we're going to continue to develop our presentation, is critical in providing a timely response. Next slide. So here in this slide, we really divided it out. So you're looking at 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. We just broke it down by the red so you can see, and when we go to the next slide, go ahead. There they are. We obviously covered the names, but these are the students that we have identified immediately as a tier 3. And look at their achievement percentile. So this first student is the 3rd percentile. So 97% of students taking this particular state test are performing better than this student. So they need to be on our radar immediately. We haven't talked yet about the social emotional piece. We are really driving forth in the instructional piece, but this is not necessarily about grades. This is really looking at the standards of a reading course as they apply to state criteria. So again, in the past, we couldn't catch up with these students until maybe as much as semester, because we had to look at grades or we had to look at other patterns. But now we're getting this information as early as September. So we're really excited about tier 3. And as we continue to develop our presentation, we're going to show you how we use the concept of tiers along with social emotional to quickly identify the most needy kids at our middle school. Again, this is another slide that brings in the tiers, and you can see off to the side where it has interventions. I think that is although it's in our shorthand, we are trying to align students and interventions in this particular data set. And we know data isn't necessarily sexy, but constant studying of data and looking at ways in which kids are tiered, looking at various reading levels. And you'll notice here we have reading 3, reading 4, and reading 5 as a way of giving us information going into 6th grade. We can really determine whether they need intervention. You'll see also in the spreadsheet, we have child study indication, special education, and 504. So this particular database is being expanded by other interventions that may be outside of just the pyramid of interventions, because obviously special education is not necessarily in the general pyramid of interventions. Next slide. Okay, so I want to make a comment about master schedule. To everyone out there who works with the master schedule, The master schedule is a powerful intervention that isn't necessarily listed on the pyramid of interventions because obviously it is more of a management piece than necessarily an intervention, but it is. If you are working with the master schedule, and we do this very carefully by making our master schedule improve every year by embedding the pyramid of interventions into the master schedule. For example, rather than just use a resource or study period and asking kids to go see their teacher, we create separate course codes for Math Lab. The course codes are put into the master schedule, and we schedule kids into Math Lab or Reading Lab, even if it's out of study hall. By scheduling it, it is in their course request, it's on their schedule, it has a teacher, it can even have a pass-fail grade. Kids take it a lot more seriously, and so do parents when things show up in the master schedule because it's on the child's on their schedule. In addition to that, when it's on the schedule, it's there. The kids have to go. It's not like they can miss because every A day or B day, or however your system works, the child has to be in that location and in that place. We found that doing things after school weren't effective. Kids were tired. They weren't willing to put enough work in. Teachers were tired. So we needed to continue to back schedule things into the master schedule to make them more efficient and effective. Erin?
I think she's,
Or Danielle?
Danielle's going for it.
So you might be thinking, how does a counselor play into the making of the master schedule? So for a long time, the math schedule kind of was like the counselor's baby, and that is how we work past the teachers, and we get in early in August, and we're the ones who look at all this data, and we talk with their teachers, and we're the ones that populate Math Lab, and we do so by contacting the parents and the students over the summer to better set up their schedule for when they start. Now, with that being said, depending on how many students we get to be a part of Math Lab, we could go to, well, at the time, it's our AP that kind of drives this home. We can be like, we might need more than 2 sections of Math Lab this year. Like, can we work around this schedule to make that work so we can give the most students these accommodations and set them up for success? And I don't think any of us have ever been told no. Like, our administration really, really works with us and wants to best support our students. And exciting this year, as Brian was saying, a student takes it more seriously when it shows up on their schedule. We're not kind of just sending them down halfway throughout their study hall or their resource block and saying, go to Reading Lab. So this year we really recognized it up in 8th grade, and now we have added reading strategies to the master schedule. So now reading strategies and Math Lab are both going to show up, and we are super excited about it. Course codes. All right, course codes are fun. So now we're going to get into the fun stuff where you can start actually applying this to students.
All right, so this is ultimately where everything we have talked through comes together. This is the meat of the entire presentation, okay? So basically what you are looking at now is a snapshot of one student and how we have used a number system to identify the appropriate level of intervention. What we have done for this one student, we do for all students. We then sort the sum column from highest to lowest, which allows us to triage support. This system helps us catch kids in real time when they're struggling most and get in there with interventions before the student falls too far behind. Okay, so let me talk you through this because she likes course codes. I find this exciting. Each student picks up points at various times throughout the year. So at interim time, we track the number of D's and F's each student has. We also track when they take that fall math MAP test, which tier they fall within. So if they fall within tier 2, they would earn 2 points, or tier 3, they would earn 3 points. We then do the same for reading. Essentially, everything has a number, even the emotional score, behavior score, or attendance of a student. Then after each quarter, or honestly, even leading up to the end, we can identify our top tiers of kids that really need interventions put into place. Okay, so for this student, you can see that during quarter 1, he had only 1 DRF at interim time. and he scored in the tier 2 range for both our math reading and math assessment. The interventions we used are tracked, as you can see in the green. But then after quarter 2, the student continued to struggle. You can see his sum jumped to 8. His grades have dropped. The student moved from tier 2 to tier 3 in math. And this basically told us we needed to add a math intervention because we were heading in the wrong direction. So we then added the student to a math lab that we've kind of discussed during quarter 3. At this point in time, we already had a reading intervention in place. So we've continued to use this, track the data, and monitor the progress. Now, for this student specifically, we did end the year better than we started grade-wise, but assessment-wise, this student still struggles. This is actually one of mine. We did offer summer enrichment and already are working towards offering interventions for next school year. The sum of 33 basically tells us that this student needs to be towards the top of our list and compared to other student sums. So this gives us the ability to add up all the student sums. So we know heading into the next school year, what interventions are needed and where our focus needs to be. We can also see that the student tends to struggle most with academics versus the behavioral, social, emotional, or attendance in general.
So Aaron, before you go to the next table, I wanted to say something. So folks, this is Brian Bell, the principal speaking. If you just joined us, welcome. You're looking at really the crux, as Aaron said, of our presentation. But I want you to know you are seeing the entire year at one time. I meet with every single grade level at interim. So just imagine it, September 30th. And I work with the team to receive all of this data at one time. So I get a list. And what's there are these numbers, 6 or 3 or 10 or 12. This particular student's sum is 6 for quarter 1. And we can quickly go through that number and know that the sum represents state level testing. It represents interim D's or F's. And there could be a component on social emotional, which we will address in some other slides. And then we look through it and we have an immediate understanding of who needs help. And as you're seeing in the green, you can see that help right there. If you look at quarter 2, I get that data as it corresponds to the end of quarter 1 and then in quarter 2. So although you all are seeing this from a huge kind of, at the end of the year, this is coming out in small little chunks, and the numbers help us to address that in real time as early as possible based on the aggregate table. So there's some great questions on check-in and check-out. And we do have a few other slides, and we're going to talk about check-in and check-out, and also talk about when there is a social emotional piece. In this particular situation, you will see that this young lady, or student rather, did improve by the final quarter, all the way down to a 4. So we're pretty proud about that. That means that our interventions worked. But we're still, because of her total sum, interested in helping her as a long-term. One thing that is important about this is we save this data. So 6th grade numbers tell us about 7th grade, 7th grade numbers tell us about 6th grade. These numbers don't go away. They allow us to keep serving the kids and give us long-range database as much as a short-range database. Thanks, Aaron.
So Cody was asking about the big, where'd it go? About the spreadsheet. It is actually a ginormous spreadsheet that, the kind where you have to like scroll and scroll and scroll. And it's basically us taking the data from different reports and plugging in the numbers. So it's us printing the DF report, and then we export it through Excel, and then you can sort it by name, and then when you see 6 next to the kid's name, we go to this huge ginormous report and put a 6 down. So it does take time, but I will tell you the information that comes out of it is priceless. And once you get in the groove of it, it's something that you're used to, and you put the effort in because you know that it helps you in the end really identify who struggles most. Someone else had put something.
Yes. So did you see Michelle's question also about the tier cutoff, Aaron?
Yeah, the tier cutoff, no, there is basically, if they score in the tier 1 range, they would have no points. We wouldn't put anything down for them. If they score in the tier 2 range, we're going to put a 2. And if they score in the tier 3 range, we're going to put a 3.
And Michelle, those tiers are determined by our state test. So
Yeah.
we provide students a division state test called a MAP, measure of academic progress. That is a test that is one our division gives. Your division probably has state tests or some kind of diagnostic test. It could be PowerSchool. We used to give the Stanfords. Now we're giving a MAP test. So these are tests that we give as a division, and they simply put kids into percentiles. And a tier 2 student is in the middle percentile from about 15% all the way up to 30%. And the lowest is a tier 3. That student could be significantly below grade level, as low as 15 percentile or lower. So of course, a percentile is a measure of progress as compared to your peers, and that helps us to know that they need some help. So the 2 represents an aggregate to our sum, and a 3, of course, the biggest one, meaning that child really is struggling. And if they are getting a 2 or 3 in both math and reading, then that's a student we really need to know about, and we just can't let it go all the way to, January or February.
Someone asked also about check-in, check-out. So check-in, check-out it's going to look different based on what the student's needs is. I'll give you 2 examples. One would be it could be an academic type, so a student that needs academic interventions. So my check-in, check-out with him, I'm going to pair that student up with a mentor type teacher that I know that they have a good positive relationship with. And that student is going to have specific goals that they're going to be working on throughout the day. So they might have some type of point sheet, or it might even just be a conversation. So it's where you kind of just check in the morning and you're like, okay, what is your day going to look like today? What types of assignments are hanging over your head? And then at the end of the day, did you get the assignments completed? You didn't? Okay, so what do we need to do tomorrow? Or what can you do tonight? I know I've also done emotional check-ins with students. And so I remember one kid saying, I know, because we kind of went through the same thing every day. Okay, when you get upset today, when you feel angry, what are the things that you can do? And then you kind of check in at the end of the day. How did your day go? Did you have to use any strategies? That kind of stuff. So check in, check out, some kids like to have the point sheet. Some kids are like, get that thing out of my face. And they just kind of need that constant conversation just to like keep them moving forward. It's a very powerful tool. I get excited, but I'll stop talking about it. I'll move on. Okay.
All right. So we're going to come back to this in a second. My part of this is I'm going to break down kind of how this table comes about, because I know when this first got presented to me, it kind of was a lot of information all at once. But if you think about it, we put the timeline at the top because this is just the progression of a school year. So my student, her name is Susie. And if you think about it, interims are kind of around the October frame line. So that's all we're looking at right now. So every interim time, there is a report that myself and my dean run, and it is a DF report, and it shows the students who have a D and F in what classes. And so when that happens, Susie here had an F in math and a D in science. So before the dean and counselor kind of get involved, tier 1, we're kind of putting it out to the teachers. So Susie got brought up at our grade level team meeting, and grade level team 6th, 7th, 8th here at Blue Ridge. We meet once a morning during the week. I think 8th grade was Monday morning at the time. And she gets brought up to see if any other teachers are experiencing these new behaviors that they see out of her in class. And then one of our tier 1 interventions that we also do here at Blue Ridge is if a student has a D or F at interim time in your class, that you give an individual phone call home. So right now, maybe parents weren't aware of this, or maybe Susie wasn't aware of this. So we're going to try and let this tier 1 intervention play out and see if this phone call home and the teachers corroborating make a difference. So that's kind of where we go. So she's at like a sum 5 for quarter 1. But now we're in quarter 2, it's January. She's still on our radar because she's a 6, she's gone up. So the tier 1 interventions were put in place for Susie, but she's starting to demonstrate some of these similar patterns in English and history now. So now we're hitting up all 4 core subjects. But so the neat thing about this is tier 1 is still not going away. So now we're at interims and coming near the end of quarter 2, and the teachers still are going to call home, but now they're going to get a call home for 4 subjects. So that's still all in place. But now, because her number has gone up and she's still on our radar, that the counselor or the dean at the time has to get involved. In this circumstance, it would be the counselor. So I put Susie in structured resource because it's clear that she needs some sort of organization, whether it just be a specific teacher keeping a Google Keep for her, getting her on top of her assignments, telling her which teacher she needs to go see. And Susie's kind of getting overwhelmed. And so these classes that we're now, she's dug herself in a little bit of a rabbit hole. She's obviously getting overwhelmed. So she's now given an anytime pass to come see me when she needs to decompress or maybe even just work independently in my room. Because it is multiple subjects, I will do a parent teacher conference where I lead the teachers and the parents are here. And sometimes it's even better if the student joins too. So now these interventions are put in place. And if you're following along with the timeline, this is kind of just a scenario that happens. But now we've kind of done a lot for her. So this is a situation where it's not going to get worse because our tier 1 and our tier 2 were foundational enough that Susie's starting to show progress. And even though her number only went down by 1 point, this puts her still on our radar, but we've kind of put her on monitor status. She's kind of keeping up. The structures we put in place for her are working. And so we're at March now, and she's not your star student, but it's working out for her. And if it wasn't for this number system, we might have not caught her right in the beginning because 2 subjects out of 8, you know, still not great, but might have not originally been on our radar. So now she's just kind of put on monitor status, and we'll continue to track her throughout the 4th quarter. So. All right, so now we are going to move on to kind of where we would love for you to try this out to make sure you're following along.
This is the fun part. Okay. All right, so we would like to give you all the opportunity to test drive this system in a sense. Because of the space allowed within the slide, I'm going to kind of show you snapshots of each quarter, one at a time. Also, when planning these case studies, we were hoping to break everyone into groups. You know, you picture all this stuff, but we really don't have the capability to do that. So we are going to move on to plan B and utilize the chat. It already seems like you guys are a great group with the chat, so thank you. All right, so here we go. Pretend this is a student at your school. Looking at quarter 1, this student has 1 D or F at the interim time. They have scored in the tier 2 range for math. They have needed 2 types of social emotional interventions, and they finished the quarter with 1 D or F. The student's sum score after quarter 1 is 6. So share your thoughts in the chat. Do you feel we need interventions at this point? Should we intervene?
In addition, we know we're working with an audience that is from across our country, so we welcome everyone here. We're always curious to share ideas. Put some ideas in the chat that you might do at your school when you see something with a sum of 6, now that you sort of follow the 6. And remember, the 2 for math tier has to do with being a just slightly below average student or below grade level student in math.
All right, I'm seeing math lab. I'm seeing yes, we need interventions.
Yeah, I like
Yep.
the emotional support from that.
Exactly. Yeah, don't forget about the emotional piece to it.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yep.
You guys are good.
Yeah, and the emotional score that Erin talked about is huge for us because the emotional score lets us know that she's visited the counselor multiple times, or there could be a concern that is coming along with some of the low grades.
Oh, good, Ashley. Yep, she even put up the student success plan. Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, so do you want to continue to the next one for a sec? Well, it might be more than a second. Okay. All right, so this is the same student, okay? Because remember, I had to kind of like give you the snapshots because the screen's only so wide. So if we continue through the year, interventions are in place, and we see that the student now in Q2 has 3 Ds or Fs at interim time, and they scored in the tier 2 range on the winter math map assessment as well. The student did not seem to need social emotional interventions during Q2 beyond what was already put into place. Because remember, those interventions don't necessarily just disappear, they keep rolling. But we didn't give them any more points because we didn't need to try a different intervention, okay? So how would you dial it up, in a sense, to catch this student in real time? And or what is your takeaway from this data? What does this tell you moving forward? Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe moving forward with the check-in, check-out, monitoring progress reports, math lab, checking grades. Absolutely. And I agree with you. I feel like when I see this data, it tells me that my focus needs to be on helping the student keep up with assignments, or focusing on maybe test taking strategies. Maybe that's why their grades are going down. So maybe I need to get them in a structured resource, or even a small group with counselors that's focusing on test taking type strategies. So again, what the data kind of does is just helps us funnel into where our focus needs to be. Good job, guys. Everyone did well. All right, let's try another one. You ready? Okay. All right, so student case number 2. Now for this student, we see that they needed 2 social emotional interventions during Q1. So this means, now remember, and not all of this is done by the counselor. This means maybe the teacher needed to contact home because the student was upset during class about something. And or maybe the student needed to connect with the counselor. So that's how they earned their 2 points for social emotional. So as a counselor, we work all the time with students who get upset during class. So at this point, with a sum of 2, the student may not necessarily be on our radar, but we have this information tracked, which is good because you're going to see what happens in Q2.
Oh, hold on a minute, Erin.
Yeah.
I wanted to let everyone know, if you're looking at the emotional score of 2, you're going to also see a column called behavior score, number of referrals, and attendance. So in addition to just an emotional score, we track if a child is referred. That is, if they're referred 3 times, then that's going to be a 3. If they have attendance issues, that's going to increase that sum. So behavior and attendance and emotion, again, is informing instructional situations in this particular graph. So the social and emotional and academic are coming together, so we don't miss, as Erin is saying, that social emotional piece, and catch it before it impacts grades, because we all know it's going to. If we don't get a hold of the social emotional and the behavior and the attendance, although there may not be any Ds and Fs yet, and there may not be any state testing that's been impacted by below grade level performance, we know it's coming. Go ahead, Erin.
That's oh good. They're going to farm. That's great. Yeah, Brian maybe text something about that. All right, so Yes, during Q2, however, now like Brian was talking about, this student has had 2 referrals to the dean and has now accrued 6 absences. So now their sum has gone from 2 to 4. So when I see this, I know I need to move forward fast with some social emotional interventions and get down to what the student is struggling with during class. Contacting home is key. Has anything changed at home? Are they missing school because they feel like they are frustrated because they can't get their teacher's attention when they have questions? Are they being disruptive in class because they're trying to figure out what to do next, and then they're talking and trying to figure out directions? So I'm thinking in my head, would this student benefit from a weekly check-in to see how everything's going? I use this student, or we use this student as a case study, because if we were just looking through academic data, this student's needs would not come to the surface. But in capturing the sum, we clearly see the student is struggling and missing school. And academics most likely, like Brian said, are going to be impacted. So with a total sum of 6 after Q2, this student is not going to have the highest sum, but they would certainly be on our list of students that need multiple interventions put into place in order to find their personal success. So this is our way of just kind of showing you how this system can capture specific needs that might not be captured otherwise. Can't see all.
All right, next slide, Aaron.
I was looking at the chat. So that kind of takes us, or did you want to talk about this, Brian?
Yeah, can you go back a slide? All right, so I think this is our last slide, and I just wanted to say as the principal how valuable this is to me. I love to be able to meet with grade level teams and have really quick data where I can look down and see high sums and immediately know whether those sums are academic or behavioral and what we're doing about it. Because as you can see in the green box or the yellow colored box, there will be a whole list of things that we're putting into place. It is so relevant and timely as the principal to be able to access this. It is a lot of work. So folks out there, it does seem like a lot of work, and it is, but once you set it up and sort of do that legwork to put this in place, it kind of takes care of itself because all the names are already in a database and you just simply populate. And when you see the results of, hey, the numbers are going down, it actually encourages you to continue to work with it because the data is informing your decisions and you're feeling pretty good about it. So yeah, at the beginning, you might think, man, this seems overwhelming. But even if you just list all the kids, take them from a database and just simply cut and paste them into a spreadsheet and then just make a few columns as we have, it will really kind of fall into place. And I can't encourage you enough to use data sums to, just kind of tease out where and how to apply the interventions. All right, Aaron, thank you.
So that kind of takes us to our end point, which is kind of open for any questions.
Sure, drop anything into the chat.
I think everyone's been good about dropping in here as we go too.
The other piece I'll say is, as I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the data not only represents short-term, but long-term. So let's just say that a child ended 6th grade at a 30, but they end 7th grade at a 20, and maybe they end 8th grade at a 5. So the long-term data management of their sum can also show their maturity and the school's interventions taking place over time. And we can even share those interventions with high school.
I even think of it too, you can see the trend when you're tracking the quarters. You have those kind of students that, in 6th grade, their 3rd quarter sum was the highest. And then in 7th grade, their 3rd quarter sum was the highest. So then going into 8th grade, I can kind of, be proactive in a sense and know, okay, we've had trouble with this student before. I need to make sure that I have them in a group or on a check-in, check-out system, that I have some intervention in place to kind of prepare for that infamous Q3.
And there was a question from Ashley, and
Oh, I don't think I can see all of it.
Ashley asked, where are the tiered interventions? So we shared the slideshow with everyone. Our tiered interventions, I think, are on slide 8 and 9 and 10, and it'll show the interventions that we use that are fairly common across all of our middle schools, and those are the interventions that we apply to these students. Obviously, all of you will have unique interventions for your school division, but those usually come from different things we do at school and different things we hear from other schools.
I think Danielle dropped it in the chat again too.
How many minutes per class did the staff have to approve the schedule? So our classes are about 90 minutes. Oops.
And then they had a second piece there, Brian. Did staff have to approve? I don't know.
I'm not sure I follow that, but a lot of the staff are involved in our planning meetings because we have interdisciplinary teams. So we share a lot of the sums and the interventions with team members so that they're on board. So here's a great question about IEP status. When students have IEPs, that doesn't stop them from being part of our database. What we do is go to case managers and say, hey, did you know that a child you're case managing has a high sum? And many times the case managers are right on top of it, but sometimes they're not. And the case managers may have missed it. So we use the database for all students and use it to make sure that we're not letting any child slip through the cracks, even if they're case managed.
Michelle asked, and I think someone else too, if we have a template. Yes, but I don't know how would I.
What would be the one we shared on? The template would be all the on slides 8, 9,
Yeah,
and
it's
10. Aaron.
basically, yeah, it just would have that across the top and then your own students. So like mine has all my kids, so all of them. Danielle's typing out which staff are on our unified mental health team.
So Michelle asked, just to be clear, the chart is updated at midterm and at the end of each quarter. We also update it at interim. So our interim is, we have 9-week quarters. I know some schools do 6 weeks, but we do 9. So we have 4 quarters in a year, and about 4.5 weeks is our interim. And we try to update the chart at interim. So that way we can jump right in if we start to see a slide. This is particularly helpful in September. We do also update them at the end of the quarter. So we update them 8 times a year. That would be at the first interim, then the quarter, then the next interim, and semester and quarter, and such and so forth. So again, we try to formally update the chart, but we also can, obviously, if a student really starts to tumble in the middle of a time period, we would hear that through our team meetings, and we could update the chart at any time, really.
So we
I am gonna click over to the next slide just so that you have our names and our contact information. If you want to email any of us, I think by template somebody might have meant just so that you can edit this pyramid yourself and like put in place your own interventions and like add and delete. I am sharing like 3 screens right now, so I
we
can't
have a lot of screens going on here.
go look for it. But here is our name and our contact information. And then I think if you've been to other sessions, you know to fill out that bit.ly form. So keep asking your questions. I'm just on our names now.
Oh yeah, I can't see if people are still asking questions.
I'm answering Anne about our PLCs.
Okay.
Folks, we really enjoyed presenting. We hope that our data system gets you thinking a little bit on ways to improve real time, the real-time aspects of knowing who your students are that are struggling and helping them to turn it around, especially the introduction of the social emotional components into the data aggregate.
Oh. Manage all this data, but I can't manage a chat.
Oh, good. Bitly
Oh,
wasn't
you
in
put
chat.
she put the link in there. That's even better. Thank you, Miriam.
Sorry, I was busy putting things in the chat and had my volume turned down, but I heard my name. So thank you. Are you all wrapping up?
Yes,
I think we are, yeah.
I think we are.
Perfect. All right.
This was
Well,
a good
then.
group.
Yeah, no, this is excellent. Thank you so much. I am going to be providing support on that Schools to Watch celebration that's coming up in 35 minutes. So I am going to say let's call it a day unless anyone has any other questions. All right. Thanks for staying until the end, and enjoy your summer. Thanks again for spending your last hours with us.
Thank you for having us.
Of course, of course. Take care, everyone. We'll see you again next week at 10:30 Eastern for our first round of sessions. And please join us at the Schools to Watch celebrations that are coming up. Take care.
Bye, everybody.